A wail of disbelief rose later as a second rumble came. At this point, we all knew what that was, that it was the second tower. And when that happened, we were covered in the same dust that Ruth was talking about. You see, we had a beautiful northwest breeze. It was the kind that gives you those beautiful blue skies. And we were southeast of downtown, so all of Manhattan came and fell on Brooklyn that day. Not as much as you saw in the photographs, but it fell, and I got covered in it as Ruth did. Here's the part you may not know. Those towers contained lots of file cabinets. And what exists in file cabinets but papers? And so while the file cabinets and the concrete and the steel all plummeted, the paper went up into the air and fluttered about and then fell like rain, like snow, all over us. Papers wafting down like something out of a movie, falling like a tender confetti. It could have been a ticker tape parade, except that it wasn't. It could have been a lot worse, you know. It was election day. The towers usually hold 50,000 people. Most of them were voting. God bless their little civic hearts. They were doing their duty and were saved. Some were dropping off children at school for the first time, many of them from New Jersey. People stood about for the rest of the day, transfixed, wanting, as I said, to do something but unable to do anything. We were conscripts to the horror, forced to watch. In my office, we tried to figure out what to do and couldn't figure out anything. Eventually, we discovered the only thing we could do was pass messages. The phones were spotty, you see, and people in Manhattan could call Brooklyn Heights, but they couldn't call the deeper parts of Brooklyn and Queens. And so we would take messages from Manhattan and then call their families down deeper in the city. You remember 100 and some years ago, and I mean that word figuratively, when there were no cell phones? When if you wanted to place a long-distance call, you had to talk to an operator? My mother used to do that. She served that way during World War II. And she used to be the operator connecting the GI in New York to his girlfriend in South Carolina. And of course, the connections weren't always so good. So the man over in New York would say, "Tell her that I love her." But of course, she couldn't hear her. So my mother spent many days saying, "He says he loves you." She said she loves you too. That's what we did all day. She's all right. We heard her voice. He's okay. We heard from her. Telling mothers, fathers, spouses, children, and parents that their family was okay. That's what we did. Not very glamorous, nothing like firefighters, but we did what churches do. We knit our people together. We did a lot of things. But what I remember is the gray sky of the pulverized building and the rain of the papers and the confusion and the unknowing and the not being sure and the being paralyzed by circumstance. 10 years later, the sites are clear, the memorials are up with their clarity and their pristine-like honor. The memorials are now being honored. The open wound has been closed, but there's still a scar, or you wouldn't be here today, would you? Would we be in Afghanistan or even Iraq if it wasn't for 9/11? Would the costs of those wars perhaps have kept us from the great recession we now enjoy? Would we have the Patriot Act or the Transportation Security Administration or the Department of Homeland Security or even our current president if that hadn't happened? Well, that's not for me to say. I have no knowledge there. It is a cliche, of course, to talk about how 9/11 changed us forever, and even if it is true, cliches inherently become meaningless because we would just repeat them over and over. But if we are a different nation, how are we a different nation? And that's what I want to know. To be honest, I have no idea what it meant, and I will tell you flat out that no one knows what it meant. No one, no one, no one. I don't care what TV station they're on. I don't care how many books they've written. I don't care how many letters trail after their name. I don't care how many battles they were in. Nobody knows what it means. Because that's the point of a great catastrophe. It boggles the mind. It's intended to boggle the mind, to upset all of our assumptions. You know, the day after that, the late Jerry Falwell, may God grant him rest, because I will not, quickly pronounced 9/11 was divine judgment for abortion and feminism and gay rights. I'm trying to find out how that happens, but you know, you've got to be the first out of the block, you know, if you're going to make the impression. We went to war against terrorism, we were told. And then a book came out by Chris Hedges, who called War as a Force That Gives Us Meaning. And now I realize that one of the reasons we went to war is so we could have something to do to give it meaning. We are giving it meaning by going to war. It's not that the war was necessary for us. It was necessary for us to find a meaning in it. We were finding meaning by doing that. Some looked for deeper hidden elements and looked in the attacks themselves and saw conspiracies or untold stories. And all of them have in common something that's so human and so important, even if we think they're wrong. They all want to have an answer. What happened to my world? But as I said last week, if you came to church, when I talk about failure, events like this have one effect that is vital for us to take into our hearts. We are uncomfortable not knowing what the world is like. And yet, profoundly, the world is not something we can ever really know. We just pretend we know every day. We pretend the world is arranged so we can get up and go to work and put on our clothes and make all these things happen, and forget that at any moment, be it an earthquake or a hurricane or an attack, our whole world can be upended for no good reason whatsoever. We live on the thinnest crust of civility, civilization, and predictability. That we are not all more dead than we are is really more stunning than some of us are. We deal with the issue Job faced in that fabled story in the Hebrew Scriptures. The fabled man that God allowed to be completely demolished, his family ruined, his business taken away, his body racked with sores, and his friends, the Jerry Falwells of their day, came to tell him what it all meant. Oh, it was because of this. Oh, it was because of that. And eventually Job said, "Go away, all of you. You have no idea." And he was right. But then Job did something all of us would like to do. We look up at whatever gods are in the sky, and even atheists at this point want there to be a God, so we can say, "Why did you let this happen?" We all want to say that. And in the story of Job, God says, essentially, you can't handle the truth. It's just too big. There is no point. There is no meaning. There is no truth to be found. There is just reality. Get over it. When this happens in the book of Job, Job, having met God face to face now, realizes that he had asked the $10,000 question and gotten the answer. And it was not the answer he wanted, so he said, "Sorry." That's essentially what Job said. And that's what I want to remind you about today. There are no easy answers. We can rail at the gods, we can rail at the Arabs, we can rail at the homosexuals or the feminazis or whatever we want. No one can explain it because there is no explanation. We cannot expect the world to make sense. It's we who want it to, it's not the world that is obliged to. But I do know that we can learn from this in a way that we should learn, could learn if we would learn, is to abandon our moral clarity about the world, the confidence we all have that the world is arranged mightily to our advantage. No, we are not evil, nor are those who committed mass murder any less evil than they are. But the world is not as simple or as clear as we long for it to be. And I know we want it to be simple and clear. We want it to be that way, but it is not. We were attacked because we did not recognize that others could see us as less than good. How could that happen? We're America. We're the good guys.